This is $1 million fentanyl lab, a death factory that can produce enough poison in one day to kill an entire city. And we're going to show you the difference between this industrial plague, a $50,000 human drug mule, a $200 drug that can either save your life or destroy it, all the way down to this $1 high that steals the futures of children. The descent begins at rock bottom, where the most vulnerable grasp for oblivion in the form of a $1 inhalant high, glue sniffing. In forgotten alleys and under bridges, street children, often as young as 5, huff toxic solvents from discarded tubes, driven by hunger, abuse, or sheer loneliness. According to the World Health Organization, nearly 20% of middle and high school students in the US have experimented with inhalants, but globally, it's the desperate youth in low-income nations who bear the brunt, with prevalence soaring among homeless populations in places like Nepal and Pakistan. The process is brutally simple: a rag soaked in glue pressed to the face, inhaling fumes that flood the brain with euphoria but devastate neurons in seconds. Imagine the rush, a dizzying detachment from pain, only to awaken to irreversible damage. Heart arrhythmias, sudden sniffing death from cardiac arrest, or chronic organ failure. In one tragic cycle, a child in Karachi might spend less than a rupee on glue, yet end up with brain atrophy that mimics advanced dementia by adolescence. This isn't experimentation, it's survival's cruel bargain, where despair costs pennies but steals futures wholesale. But what if desperation demands more unpredictability? For just 15s, the chemical gamble of K2 or spice enters the fray, a synthetic cannabinoid masquerading as harmless incense but unleashing chaos far beyond natural marijuana. Lab-made in clandestine operations, these compounds bind to brain receptors 10 to 200 times more fiercely than THC, with no balancing cannabidiol to temper the storm. Users roll the dice on every batch. One hit might induce serene highs, the next catatonic stupors or violent psychosis, spawning zombie outbreaks in cities like New York and Los Angeles, where emergency responders have battled waves of dazed, aggressive victims. Picture a homeless man in Skid Row inhaling what he thinks is safe pot, only to convulse in seizures, his heart racing toward failure as hallucinations devour reality. Reports from the American Association of Poison Control Centers highlight thousands of calls annually, with symptoms including rapid heartbeat, delirium, and even death. Over 100 globally tied to these unpredictable poisons. Marketed with cartoon packaging to lure youth, Spice thrives on its low cost and evasion of drug tests, turning a cheap thrill into a lottery of life and death where underground chemists outpace the law. Escalating the stakes, $50 unlocks the counterfeit connection of MDMA or ecstasy, the glittering lure of rave culture, promising euphoria and unity amid pulsing lights and bass. In EDM festivals across the US, revelers pop pills for that rush of serotonin-fueled connection, but the dark pivot comes swiftly. Over 90% of seized ecstasy is adulterated, often laced with fentanyl or other synthetics, amplifying risks exponentially. The high surges, empathy floods in, barriers dissolve, but dehydration from endless dancing can spike body temperatures to lethal levels. While the infamous Suicide Tuesday crash plunges users into depressive abysses, with studies linking MDMA abuse to heightened suicidal behaviors among adolescents. Envision a festival goer, heart pounding in bliss, unaware their pill harbors fentanyl. One misstep leads to overdose, as emergency rooms report surges in adulterated cases. The Drug Enforcement Administration notes that these fakes, cut with everything from caffeine to PMA, turn promised utopias into nightmares, where the human cost, fatal crashes and long-term mood disorders, far outstrips the fleeting glow. Yet, duality defines the next rung at $200, ketamine, the dissociative divide bridging club highs and clinical hope. In underground parties, users chase the K-hole, a terrifying plunge into paralysis and detachment, where the body feels alien and reality fractures into hallucinations, vivid, out-of-body terrors that can scar the psyche. Chronic abusers risk bladder damage, addiction, and cognitive fog, with street names like Special K belying its dangers. But flip the script. In medical settings, low-dose ketamine emerges as a revolutionary antidepressant, slashing severe depression symptoms in hours where traditional drugs fail, as evidenced by FDA approvals for esketamine nasal sprays. Imagine a veteran haunted by PTSD, finding rapid relief in supervised infusions, their suicidal ideation easing amid the same dissociation that wrecks recreational users. This stark split, destruction versus salvation, highlights ketamine's peril. Unsupervised highs court overdose, while guided therapy saves lives, per Yale studies showing its neuroplasticity boost. The line blurs in abuse, where K-hole seekers grapple with dependency, underscoring how one substance embodies the drug world's extremes. Now, the climb intensifies to 50,000 north. The price of a human body turns smuggling vessel, the drug mule ensnared in exploitation's web. Desperate souls, often coerced from poverty-stricken regions, swallow or insert pellets of cocaine or heroin, each bundle worth thousands on the street, totaling loads valued at this staggering sum. The narrative is grim. A single leaking pellet unleashes a massive overdose, dissolving organs in agony as the body becomes a ticking bomb. Picture a Nigerian woman at an airport, palms sweating as she carries 1 kilo of heroin pellets, enough for 10,000 doses, her life hanging on fragile latex. If one bursts, death is gruesome, convulsions, cardiac arrest. Literature from forensic journals documents fatal cases where surgical removal fails amid peritonitis or obstruction. This dehumanization fuels cartels billions, preying on migrants' hopes, turning flesh into contraband where survival odds plummet with every swallowed grain. Survival, however, extracts its own toll at $100,000. The bill for a second chance after a fentanyl overdose plunges victims into ICU hell. Ambulance sirens wail, ER teams administer naloxone amid seizures, then days in intensive care battling respiratory failure and organ shutdown. Premier Incus analysis pegs average costs at $2,500 for ICU stays alone, ballooning to 6 figures with extended ventilation and rehab. Awakened to a nightmare, crushing debt, with national overdose expenses hitting $11 billion annually for hospitals, per CDC estimates. Envision a young addict revived from the brink, only to face bankruptcy that spirals back into relapse. Stress fueling the cycle. SAMHSA reports millions affected, where a second chance chains survivors to financial ruin, underscoring healthcare's brutal inequities amid the epidemic. At the summit towers the 1,000 plus industrial plague, the clandestine fentanyl lab, a fortress of chemistry birthing death on a massive scale. Far from street corners, these operations in Mexico's Sinaloa forests or hidden warehouses churn precursors from China into potent powder via the one-pot method. Simple as soup, yet yielding millions in pills from a single kilo. Setup costs? Minimal. $1,000 in chemicals morphs into 800x profits per U.S. indictments, with equipment like pill presses and VAT sourced online for pennies. Raw materials, naphtha, lye, and 4-ANPP shipped disguised as adapters or cosmetics, evading detection in billions of packages. The dangers? Explosive reactions, toxic fumes, scarring lungs, and labs rigged to blow amid cartel wars. DEA seizures reveal super labs producing tons weekly, valued at millions, fueling 70,000 plus US deaths yearly. This isn't petty dealing. It's industrialized genocide, where precursors bypass borders via air cargo, mixed in crude vats over inconsistent heat, yielding uneven lethality. The science is Gupta's streamlined synthesis. 3 steps at room temperature, no fancy gear, yet analogs proliferate, dodging regulations. Human stories abound. Cooks like Sinaloa's apprentices, dropping out at 12, mastering the brew for cartels that rake billions while communities crumble. Detection hinges on canine units and spectrometers sniffing for traces, but volume overwhelms. 116 million pills seized in 2023, yet hundreds more slip through. The revelation? This plague's profitability. Cheap, potent, addictive, connects all rungs, from glue's despair to mule's peril, feeding an empire where one lab's output eclipses lives lost, demanding global reckoning. From $1 despair to $1 million death machines, this comparison unveils a world where cheap highs mask profound disparities, valuing profit over humanity. As extremes collide, they expose our fractured values. Addiction's grip tightening amid unchecked greed. Which rung shocked you most and why? Share below to spark change.